Welcome back to another episode of What is Truth. Now, before we get any further, I just want to mention that, there wasn't an episode last week. I don't know if anybody even noticed that, honestly, but I did do that somewhat on purpose. And the main reason for that is that the interview that will be part of this episode was recorded, but the audio was not captured. So we had to reschedule and re-record the interview, which is a amazing interview that you will definitely want to stick around for. So because that had to be re-recorded, we pushed it back a week. Now, what I also realized is that this show is going to move to a bi-weekly basis. The reality is that I cannot continue to bring high-quality content out every week. It is not very doable right now. So we are going to move to a bi-weekly basis, and we will enjoy content every other week. So I just wanted to put that out there. But today, we're kind of structuring this first part of this episode around the interview that you're about to see. It is an interview with Pastor David Kabanje, the chaplain at Union College, and it's a very, very important conversation. A very important conversation. So I hope that you'll stick around for that. Now, the interview will be centered around a sermon that Pastor Kabanje gave a couple weeks ago at College View Church here in Lincoln, Nebraska. And the sermon was titled The Pickled Gospel. And it's a very important conversation. So it actually, I think one of the ways, I'm going to sum it up in my words, and then he will sum it up in his own words in the interview. One of my favorite quotes that you'll hear consistently throughout this show is what C.S. Lewis said. C.S. Lewis said, Christianity, if false, is of no importance. But if it's true, it's of infinite importance. The only thing it cannot be is moderately important. It's either everything or it's nothing. So the reality is that Christianity is not something that can just be an addition to your life. As Pastor Rome once said, I've quoted him a few times, Christianity is not an addition to your life. You don't even know what your life is until you have the gospel. So if you're listening to this, whether you're a Christian, an atheist, an agnostic, somewhere in between, a different religion, whatever it may be, if you're listening to this, whether Christianity is true or not does indeed matter. And what Pastor K went through in this sermon is the idea that if it is true, that you ought to saturate yourself in it. It's the pickled gospel. And of course, a pickle is actually just a cucumber. And that's the analogy he was going for. So if Christianity is true, if the gospel is true, if Christ died for us, then there's nothing more important than that, and it ought to transform our everyday lives. So the goal of this show, What is Truth, is to pursue truth, to find out whether it is true. Because, of course, this goes both ways. We as believers are saying that if it is true, there's nothing more important than that. But you could also say, as a non-believer, you could say, but if it's false, none of it matters at all, and you're wasting your time. And that would be very true. It is indeed true that if Jesus did not rise from the dead, our faith is futile, as Paul said. So what do we do with that? Well, what we find is Christianity requires of us, if it is true, to do this thing that we don't like. And it's called dying to yourself, essentially. You're not living for yourself. You are accepting Christ's authority over you. And we don't like that. And we're going to ask Kabanje about that in the next clip. But the idea of self-denial, which is the word he used, is a very prevalent concept, or at least used to be a very prevalent concept in the Christian church, and is supposed to still be a prevalent concept in any Christian church because it is the center of the gospel. There is a quote from Jesus Christ that I think is one of the most important and most prevalent quotes today. It is from the passage in John chapter 8. Just all of John chapter 8 is fantastic, but particularly John chapter 8, the woman caught in adultery. Now, the woman caught in adultery is brought to Jesus, thrown down at his feet, and they ask Jesus if she should be stoned, because that was the law of Moses, and they were testing him. And one of Christ's responses, what he says, sums up a problem I think we actually have in the church in a weird way. We're kind of dissecting what he said. Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more." I found that it's usually one or the other. Either we belong to a church that's either neither do I condemn you, which is all love, which has, good intention. It's good to love. But if you have all love and no truth, then you have nothing. We've talked about that before. But also you find churches that are the go and sin no more churches. And they are all about morals, and they have no love. Usually it's one extreme or the other. And that's the problem we run into today, is that it's supposed to be both. Jesus didn't say one or the other. He said both. In this one sentence, he encapsulates what it's like to live a life of truth and love, of morals and love. It's ethics. It's what true love is. One thing that Pastor K always told me and continues to say to this day is we are called to show unconditional divine love. And I happen to believe that divine love includes the go and sin no more. It includes living a moral lifestyle, but it's only a part. It's not a whole. You can't have truth without love, and you can't have love without truth. So what we find here is that when the gospel saturates us, we are called. We are in a way almost required to, if we accept the gospel. Not in a way of works-based salvation. It's more of like James says, faith without works is dead. And faith without works is dead. That does not mean that you need to do works in order to be saved. What it means is if you are saved, you will do works. And when we talk about saturating ourselves in the gospel, it's about self-denial. It really is. And the gospel message typically is just accept Jesus, just love others, and you're good. We don't like the self-denial part. The self-denial part is the part we don't like, the part we don't talk about. It kind of falls into that category of go and sin no more. Because when we deny ourselves, we are admitting that there's something wrong with us. We're admitting that we are not perfect creatures, and that's the problem. We don't like the idea that we're not perfect. One of the most common ideas you hear in the world today is believe in yourself. And there's a quote that I'll put on the screen that believe in yourself is a popular dominant philosophy. Did not begin with Disney, Oprah, or Kierkegaard. It began with a snake in a garden. And that quote is powerful because it's saying we ought not believe in ourselves. In fact, that quote is making the boldest claim that it can make, saying that that's actually the lie the devil told in the Garden of Eden. And that lie the devil told is you can be like God. The devil lied in the Garden of Eden by convincing Adam and Eve that they did not need God. But friends, we do need God. If Christianity is true, then we need Jesus. Because Christianity claims that Jesus is the only way to be saved. And if that's true, then we need him. And if we need him, and once we accept him, he will transform our lives from head to toe. Everything about us will be radically transformed. Nothing will be the same again. And it's hard to even imagine. There's also the very important point that we have to remember where we came from. We have to remember the wretch we once were in order to become more like Christ going forward. And that's more self-denial. That's saying that, hey, I'm not perfect. I'm far from perfect. But because of what Christ did for me, I'm moving closer to it. This is a countercultural idea. It's not popular. And what I love about the sermon that Pastor Kabanje gave was that it balanced this idea of, hey, this is not a popular idea with the love. He saturated it in so much love that it resonated with people who maybe wouldn't like that message. Because most of us don't like that message. In fact, the gospel is an offensive message. And again, these are all things we're going to get into in this interview shortly here. But the gospel is like a pickle. It's like a saturated pickle. We're more like the pickle, actually. We're saturated in the gospel. It's more. There's a story that perfectly embodies self-denial, and that is the song I've decided to follow Jesus. And if you stay here till the end, we're going to go into that story a little bit. Self-denial is one of the most unpopular things in the culture today. In the culture today, which again goes along the lines of this show, it's searching for truth. What is truth? Asking that question Pontius Pilate asked. We're digging into this culture that doesn't even really believe in truth anymore, and we're asking these questions. And what we're finding is that the truth of Christianity is you need to deny self. And that's not popular. So as we go into this interview with Pastor K, I encourage you to think about what he says. He is one of the most loving people I've ever met in my life. He shows Christ in such a way that you just feel the love. And yet, keep in mind, what he's preaching is such truth. And it's kind of, in a way, an unpopular truth. We can get through to people by showing them love. And I encourage you with that today. Now enjoy this interview, and I'll see you soon.